The canvas of eternity. The storm had come without warning, a sudden shift in the air that sent the trees shaking and the sea crashing against the cliffs. Inside the modest stone cottage perched on the edge of the world, a fire crackled softly in the hearth, but the flickering light could not dispel the coldness of the atmosphere. At the far side of the room, the old man sat before an easel, his wrinkled hands expertly working the brush. His eyes were fixed on the canvas, but they were not just seeing the image before him. No, the eyes of Tobias Wren, the painter, saw beyond what the world could perceive. He saw the truth, the hidden beauty, and the dark, unspoken horrors of life. His art was a reflection of his soul, and it was a soul that had been shaped by years of suffering, loss, and yearning. Tobias had not always been this way. He had not always been a hermit who lived on the edge of the world, painting his dreams and nightmares in solitude. Once he had been part of the world. Once, his paintings had graced the walls of galleries, filled with admiration and praise. But something had changed. Something had shifted inside him. He had been haunted, not by ghosts, but by the truth that his art had come too close to the real, too close to the dark forces that ruled the unseen. For years, he had locked himself away, not out of shame, but out of fear. Fear of what his art might reveal, and fear of what it might awaken. No one had come to see him for a long time. His paintings, once valued, were now dismissed as the work of an eccentric, a madman lost in his visions. Tobias, however, had not given up. He still painted, day after day, pouring his heart and his demons onto the canvas. His fingers were covered in paint, streaks of color that told stories, stories of longing, of sorrow, of love lost, and of unspoken terror. But no one saw them. And yet, as he finished the latest painting, a strange sense of foreboding gripped him. It was as if the brush had moved of its own accord, as if something else had guided it, and the image that emerged was unlike anything he had painted before. There was a woman in the painting, a woman with eyes as dark as the abyss, and a face so beautiful it hurt to look at. Her expression was unreadable, and the colors around her seemed to swirl with an otherworldly energy. Tobias could feel her gaze even as he looked away. She was real, and yet not real. She was a dream, a memory, a ghost, and a promise all at once. The room grew colder, the shadows deepened, and Tobias shivered as the woman in the painting seemed to reach out, her fingers brushing the edge of the canvas. And then, as if answering an unspoken summons, a knock came at the door. At first, Tobias thought it was a figment of his imagination. He hadn't had a visitor in years. But the knock came again, louder this time, and he stood, heart pounding, unsure of what to do. Who would come to see him, especially on such a night? With trembling hands, he opened the door. Standing in the doorway was a man, tall and imposing, dressed in fine clothes that contrasted sharply with the humble surroundings of Tobias's cottage. The man's face was sharp, with piercing eyes that seemed to see straight through him, and his lips curled into a half-smile that was both charming and unsettling. "Good evening, Mr. Wren," the man said, his voice smooth and deep, with an air of authority. "I've heard much about you and your work. May I come in?" Tobias hesitated for a moment, but there was something in the stranger's presence that demanded respect. He stepped aside, and the man entered without another word. "I must admit," the man said as he surveyed the room, "I have been following your art for years. Your paintings are unlike anything I've ever seen. There is a depth to them, a darkness, a truth that others are too blind to appreciate." Tobias felt a chill run through him at the mention of the word truth. It was as if the man had seen through his very soul. "I've been waiting for the right moment," the man continued, "to show my appreciation for your work. That is why I am here." I would like to buy every single one of your paintings, Mr. Wren. All of them. Tobias's heart skipped a beat. His art, his soul, was worth something after all. But something about the man's proposal seemed off, as though there was an underlying motive, something darker lurking beneath the surface. Why? Tobias asked, his voice hoarse. Why would you want my paintings? The man's smile deepened, and there was a flicker of something unsettling in his eyes. Because, he said slowly, I know what you have created. I know what you have seen, and I have waited for the day when you would finally acknowledge it. I have waited for you to understand the true power of your art. The room seemed to grow colder still. Tobias felt a shiver crawl down his spine as the man stepped closer to the painting on the easel, the one he had just completed. This one, the man said, his voice almost a whisper. This one is special. I can feel it. There is something about this woman. She is not just a figure on a canvas. She is real. Tobias's heart pounded in his chest. Who are you? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I am someone who understands, Mr. Wren. Someone who has seen what you have seen. Someone who knows the price of knowledge and power. The man reached out, his fingers brushing the edge of the painting, and Tobias felt a strange surge of energy fill the room. It was as if the very air had become charged with something dark and ancient. The man's touch lingered on the canvas, and the shadows seemed to deepen, swirling around the figure of the woman. She is beautiful, the man murmured, but she is also dangerous. She is the key to something much larger, something that cannot be controlled. Tobias stepped back, his mind racing. What do you want? From me? He asked, his voice trembling. The man turned to face him, his expression unreadable. I want you to come with me, Mr. Wren. I want you to bring your paintings, all of them, to where they can be truly appreciated. I want you to see the power they hold. Tobias's heart raced. He had spent years trying to escape the shadows that had haunted him. But now, it seemed, those shadows had come for him. I will never sell my soul, Tobias said, his voice firm, though his hands shook. The man's smile widened. You misunderstand, Mr. Wren. I am not asking you to sell anything. I am offering you a chance to embrace your destiny. Before Tobias could respond, the lights flickered and the temperature in the room dropped. He felt an overwhelming sense of dread, as though the walls themselves were closing in around him. The woman in the painting seemed to move, her eyes following him as he stepped back. The man laughed, a low, sinister chuckle that sent a chill through Tobias's bones. You already belong to us, the man said. You always have. The ground beneath their feet seemed to shift, and suddenly, Tobias was no longer standing in his cottage. The air was thick with fog, and the ground was soft beneath his feet, as though he were walking on an endless expanse of clouds. The man stood beside him, a shadowy figure in the distance. What is this place? Tobias gasped. Where am I? The man did not answer. Instead, he gestured toward the horizon, where a towering castle loomed in the distance. That is where your paintings belong, Mr. Wren. That is where they will be truly appreciated. And that is where you will find what you have been searching for all these years. Tobias felt a surge of fear, but something inside him urged him forward. He did not understand it, but the pull was irresistible. He had to go. He had to know. As they approached the castle, Tobias realized that it was not just a place, it was alive. The walls seemed to breathe, the stones shifting as if they were aware of his presence. The man led him inside, through corridors lined with paintings that seemed to whisper to him, there. Eyes following him as he passed. Finally, they arrived at a grand hall, and Tobias stopped, his breath caught in his throat. At the center of the room stood a mirror, large, ancient, and ornate. And in that mirror, Tobias saw something that made his heart stop, his own face, but it was not his face. It was the woman from the painting, the woman whose eyes had followed him, whose presence had haunted his dreams. She was him, and he was her. The realization hit him like a blow. The woman in the painting was not just a creation. She was a part of him, a part of his soul, a part of his past. The truth was clear now. His art had never been about capturing the world around him. It had been about capturing himself, his darkness, his fears, his desires. And now, as the castle walls closed in around him, he knew that the power the man had spoken of was not something to be embraced. It was a curse, and the price of embracing it was the loss of everything that made him human. Tobias turned to the man, his face pale with realization.
I
"Don't want this," he whispered. But it was too late. The man's laugh echoed through the hall, and as the shadows closed in, Tobias realized that he had never been in control. His paintings, his soul, had been waiting for this moment all along. And now, they would never let him go.
whispering echoes.